Hello, Utah Valley chapter of the American Guild of Organists. My name is Seth Bott, and I am so excited to be with you today as your keynote address speaker. I love the Utah Valley chapter of the AGO because that was the first chapter I was ever a part of when I was an undergraduate at BYU. And I especially appreciate the Super Saturday event because I went to that when I was only 15 years old back in 2002 and met important people such as Carol Dean and Don Cook that were important mentors in my life. I have chosen the topic of bearing testimony through hymn playing today as my keynote address. And I would please invite you to have your hymn books readily available. So when we discuss a few hymns, that you can follow along with what I'm saying. Before I begin, I just like to share a few stories. I was told to make sure I share a few funny stories and inspiring stories. So to start off, I want to tell you a little bit about me. I grew up in a small town called Castledale, down in Emery County. I have 3 older brothers and a younger sister. We were all forced to play the piano, for lack of a better term, and I'm very grateful for that. My first piano teacher was my Aunt Pearl, my great Aunt Pearl, meaning second generation. Not necessarily terrific because she was kind of mean. She definitely slapped my hands a few times, but I am grateful for the foundation that she gave me in music. At around age 14, I really started becoming fascinated with the organ, especially the tabernacle organ. And every time we were on Temple Square, I'd always want to stop by and look at the tabernacle organ. And then I remember one general conference, we were listening to the organist play, and it was just amazing. And I remember the way he played the hymns was inspiring. He had a solid introduction and did a bunch of fancy stuff is what I called it back then. And I remember it really made me want to sing, and it gave me cold chills. And my mom said to my family, you know, that guy is from my hometown. And I said, really? Who is he? And she said, that's Clay Christiansen. All the Christiansens in Emery are his relatives. And so then is when my fascination with Clay Christiansen started. I thought it was amazing that someone from my home area could make it like he did. And then, come to find out, Mac Woberg graduated, well, he's a year older than my parents and is also from my hometown. So there's a few very quality musicians that have come from Emery County that have always been an inspiration to me. And so at that time, I really started getting interested, like I said, in the organ, and I told my parents I wanted to start organ lessons. They were looking around, they started looking around in the area for organ instructors, and they couldn't find any. And to my dismay, my organ lessons were put on hold for several months, which felt like years. And then for my birthday in November of 2001, my parents, my family, they were giving me my birthday gifts, and my parents gave me a box, and I opened it up, and it was organ shoes. And I was so excited. I looked up, I'm like, oh my gosh, organ shoes. And they said, yes, and you begin organ lessons this Thursday with Jennifer Faber. I was so excited. I don't think I've ever, even to this day, received a gift that I was more excited about on my birthday than organ shoes and being told that I'm finally starting organ lessons. Seriously, so exciting for me. So I started studying with Jennifer Faber, and that following April of 2002, she told me of a Super Saturday event at BYU, and she invited me to go to it with her and my mom. And so we went up there, and she introduced me to her teacher, who was Carol Dean. And I thought that was fascinating. And I remember there are a few things that really stick out in my head about that Super Saturday. And the reason why I'm telling you this is to show you that I am a product of the Super Saturday event. First of all, I went to a class by Carol Dean, which was marking, no, it was playing hymns in a sustained style. And I remember she was up there teaching, and I raised my hand, and I thought Carol Dean was a hyphenated first name. So I raised my hand and said, "Hey, Carol Dean, I have a question." And she said, "Yes, Seth Bott, what is your question?" And I thought, why did she call me my full name? Then a few minutes later, I raised my hand again and said, "Hey, Carol Dean." And she said, "Yes, Seth Bott." And then my mom leaned over and said, "Seth, her first name's Carol, her last name's Dean." Anyway, every time I think of Carol, I think of that story. But that class was the first class I had ever taken to realize how different it is playing the hymns on the organ. And then I went to another class by Don Cook, who taught us how to mark up the hymns. I remember being inspired by him and thinking, I hope I get to study with him when I come to BYU someday. Little did I know that a few months from then, I was going to start studying with him privately. And then at the very end of the Super Saturday, we had a closing session in the Madsen Recital Hall, and Lela Palmroy was the organist. And she played, I don't remember what the hymn was, but I remember how amazing it was to sing it. And it had an awesome creative introduction, and it had an interlude between two of the verses. And it just really was a supportive, fascinating spiritual experience to sing with that. And I remember thinking, I hope I can play the organ like her someday. So again, that Super Saturday was all about hymns, and it just really inspired me. And so I went home from that event and started practicing harder. And that summer, my organ teacher sent me to what they call Musician Summerfest at BYU. And I was able to take daily organ lessons from Dr. Cook. And I remember when I met him, I'm like, "Oh, you're the guy I met at the Super Saturday." And I got to take daily lessons from him. And I will never forget, the last day I was there, I told him, I said, "Yeah, my organ teacher down in Castle Dell is trying to find me a new teacher because she feels like I've surpassed her ability to teach." And Dr. Cook said, "Well, if you would like, I have room in my studio. I'd be happy to teach you." I couldn't believe my ears. And so after that lesson, I called my parents. My parents knew I was very serious. I was a very serious student. I practiced really hard, and they never batted an eye, and they were totally committed, and they said, "Yes, we will do it." Now as an adult, I look back with huge respect and admiration for my parents, because that was a financial commitment, because lessons were a lot more, and we also had to make the commute from Castle Dell every other week, which is almost 2 hours each way, so I could study with Dr. Cook. Still an amazing experience. So I started studying with Dr. Cook in August of 2002, and I did it all through high school. I graduated high school in 2005. Then I came to BYU as an organ major and studied for a year with Dr. Cook. And then I went on my mission for 2 years, came back and did my bachelor's and master's degree at BYU, studying under Dr. Cook mainly, but did take a few lessons with Dr. Bush. And then I was accepted into the grad program, DMA program at the University of Kansas. And I moved to Kansas and lived there for 5 years and studied underneath Dr. James Higdon and Dr. Michael Bauer, and had an amazing experience there. And I graduated there May of 2020 and moved back to Salt Lake City. And here I'm director of music at St. James Episcopal Church. Not only do I play the organ for all services, but I am in charge of planning all the music and in charge of weekly choir rehearsals. I also work at the University of Utah as a collaborative pianist and accompany opera students, which is a good experience because I wouldn't be able to do that otherwise. And then I have a very large and ever-growing organ studio of 32 private students right now, which I love doing. That's my passion, is teaching. And then I love to freelance, accompany choirs, and do recital work around the country, which I do about 3 or 4 times a year. Okay, Now let's move on to the next part, bearing testimony through hymns. I sent everyone a handout, so hopefully you can follow right along now with me. So from my experience, and I think many of you would agree with me, good organ playing really makes a night and difference in any worship service, whether it's a sacrament meeting or if you play for any other religions, their worship services. I've noticed that we as organists are either the biggest influence in someone's spiritual experience or perhaps the biggest distraction, and none of us want to be that. If we play hymns in a confident, supportive way with good organ technique and creative registrations that follow the text, we will inspire and motivate probably 95 to 98% of the people who are there. And they will feel the Spirit and be moved to tears frequently. I've seen it with myself, and I've seen it with my organ students and other organ colleagues. I know what impact organists have had on me, such as, like I said, at the Super Saturday Lella Pomeroy, or when I listen to General Conference and listen to Clay Christiansen play. However, when we play in this fashion, for some reason, we'll irritate some people. Some people will think we're showing off, or some people will think we're playing too loudly. However, I try very hard not to pay attention at all to those people, because some people you just can never please. And I would much rather inspire the 95 to 98% and irritate the 2 to 3% than play in a timid fashion and inspire absolutely no one. I mean, yes, if you play in a timid fashion, you might not irritate that 2 to 3%. However, you will not inspire the 95, and I would much rather do that. Just to illustrate this, a few Sundays ago, I played for a friend of mine's ward. About 6 months ago, I played an organ solo in that ward, and the bishopric asked my friend if I would be willing to come back and play their entire meeting. And so he asked me and said, Seth, will you come back and play for our Easter services the week after General Conference? And I said, sure. And he said, well, listen, it's a big commitment. The bishopric wants you to play prelude, all 3 hymns, postlude, and also 2 organ solos. And I said, okay, I'd be happy to do all that. So I went back to that ward a few Sundays ago, and I played. And I tried very hard to plan my prelude that were Easter themed. And then the opening hymn was Christ the Lord is risen today. And I played it in a bold fashion because this is a jubilant hymn that is celebratory. It's about the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So I'm not going to play that in a timid fashion. So I played it with a full principal chorus, and I added reeds and got bigger and bigger. And on the last verse, I reharmonized. And really, the last Alleluia, I had full organ with a big 32-foot reed rumbling in the pedal on a big pedal point on low G, and then finally it resolved to the low C. And right after I did that was the invocation. And this man walked up, and he started praying, and he was thanking the Lord for a variety of things. And then he said, we are so grateful for good music. And then he immediately started getting emotional. And it touched me because I thought the Lord is using me as a vehicle or as an instrument to touch these people. And I was very grateful for that opportunity. Again, it reiterates how music can affect everybody. I had all these opportunities during that sacrament meeting, my prelude, all the hymns, the 2 organ solos and postlude, to inspire and to touch people. And that's how we all are when we get to perform for our congregations. Okay, let's go to the next point. How to show the meaning of hymns and inspire singing. And I have several points on how we can do that. The first is at the very beginning, and that is the introduction. We need to make sure we practice and play a solid introduction. This is your solo, so don't mess it up. We want to inspire people to sing. But before I get into that, I want to also set the basis of why we play introductions. They're not just arbitrary things that are customary for us to do. There are reasons why we do them. The first reason is to set the mood of the hymn. Is this a jubilant hymn? Is it a meditative hymn? So that's what the introduction does. Number one. Number two, it also sets the tempo. Number three, it establishes the melody. Maybe the hymn we're singing is unfamiliar. And in cases like that, I would highly recommend you play a longer introduction, maybe even an entire verse. And the fourth reason why we play introductions, which I think is the most important reason, is to inspire people to sing. We want people to want to open up that hymn book and sing. Again, a good illustration of this is Clay Christiansen and his famous introductions at General Conference. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I would highly recommend you pull up YouTube and search some of Clay Christiansen's General Conference hymn playing. All of the Tabernacle organists play fabulously, and they're concert, world-renowned organists. However, Clay has a special touch with his hymn playing, I think, that you will like, that just inspires singing. So that is why I think is the most important reason why we do introductions. Okay, second point. Let the text guide you. Again, jubilant versus meditative, or somewhere in the middle. So let's try to put all of the hymns in the hymn book into these three categories. Jubilant hymns, such as maybe Rejoice the Lord is King, High on a Mountaintop, or meditative hymns such as sacrament hymns. And then hymns that are somewhere in the middle, I would say, are like, Lord, I would follow thee. They're not necessarily jubilant, but they're not contemplative. So we want our registration to reflect that text. For example, let's turn to hymn 86, How Great Thou Art. Overall, I think this is a jubilant hymn. So please turn to that hymn. However, even though this is a jubilant hymn overall, there are verses in here that are not so jubilant, that are pretty sinister. For example, verse 3, when it talks about, and when I think that God, his son not sparing, sent him to die, I scarce can take it in. I think the registration needs to reflect what you're singing there. So, the way I register this hymn is I usually have a full principal chorus, and then I might add a little bit on when we get to the chorus, when we sing, Then Sings My Soul, and then when I get to the verses, I really let my registration reflect. So verse 1, jubilant. Verse 2, maybe more contemplative, because it's about thinking of, and went through the woods and forest glades I wander. So maybe we can bring down the registration a little bit there. But on the third verse, it's talking about, it's sad stuff. Jesus dying and God sending his son to die. So I think we should reflect that in our registration by maybe taking the mixture off, maybe the 2-foot principal off, adding a reed, maybe a 16-foot manual stop, maybe some rumble in the pedal if you have it, maybe a 32-foot rumble, and just really reflecting that registration. And then when you get to the chorus, add some brighter stops. And then on the last verse, when Christ shall come with shout of acclamation and take me home, what joy shall fill my heart. You definitely want to have a big full organ sound there. I promise you, if you play it this way, you will bring people to tears. People will be touched by these beautiful words. I remember playing this when I was in Kansas. I worked at First United Methodist Church in Lawrence. And I actually got to play every week on the biggest organ in the state of Kansas. It had 123 ranks. And this was the recessional hymn. And I played it in this fashion. And I remember as soon as we were done, they were saying, dismissing people, and I could hear people crying. And the director of music got up and said, people were touched today by the hymns. And the reason being is because people can resonate with the words when the organist plays them in this type of fashion, because they can hear its text painting. What they are singing is being reflected in the way it is sung. Okay, on to the next point. Follow the phrasing of the text. I think this is really important because in a public speaking situation, if someone just speaks in run-on sentences, it's very, very hard to understand what they are saying. However, if they punctuate correctly, there's no confusion with what they're saying. If they make dramatic pauses in the middle of sentences, we really don't know what they're saying. So I think that's the exact same with hymn playing. Unfortunately, in our church, we have a history of the congregations and organists breaking in places where they shouldn't. For example, please turn to hymn 204. Silent Night. So the way we're so used to singing this is with weird breaks. For example, I'm going to say the way we sing it. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. Round yon virgin, mother and child. Okay, if I were saying that without singing it, I would think I heard round virgin, mother and child. Sounds like we're calling Mary round. Yes, I know she just had a baby, but it's probably not the most diplomatic thing to call her round. However, if you look at the text, there's no break after bright and round. So we need to make sure that we reflect that in the way we play it. So, and connect those thoughts. So maybe we should play it like this. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round yon virgin, mother and child. Now all of a sudden that makes sense because now we're saying that she's around yon virgin mother. They're over here. All is calm, all is bright around yon virgin, mother and child. Now that makes sense, but before it didn't. So let's really make sure that we are helping our audience, our congregation, with making sense of the text by doing this. A colleague of mine at BYU, Jonathan Evans, I remember a story he told of this. He was playing for a sacrament meeting, and he really took this seriously and would do creative breaks with the text or creative carry-throughs. And he had a member of his bishopric, I believe, come up to him and say, I've never made sense of the hymns, some of the hymns, until you started playing. And then he shared that story with us in studio class one night. And I remember thinking, yep, that's exactly why we do this. So just another idea. I skipped the hymn on my last bullet point, Praise to the Man. But essentially, that is that registration plan is basically what I would do with How Great Thou Art. It's a verse-chorus registration, and I would have a pretty full organ sound, and then every time I get to the chorus, I'd add a little bit. A student of mine just a few weeks ago played this for a state conference, and there was a visiting general authority. And we came up with a good registration plan for all the verses, and on the last verse, she did a reharmonization. Right after that intermediate hymn, excuse me, the visiting authority got up and said, wow, it was worth coming to this state conference just to sing that hymn in that fashion. And anyway, she texted me that right afterwards. And again, if we are demonstrating that we know what we are singing through our registration and the way we play it, our approach, it moves and affects people. And it, again, bears testimony of the hymns. My last point last hymn I would like to share and last point I'd like to make is the hymn number 66, Rejoice, the Lord is King. This is one of my favorite hymns in the hymn book. And I have pre-recorded me playing it, and I would really like you to listen to it and to hear these things that I've tried to employ. First of all, I started off with a creative introduction because I take that very seriously. I want to inspire people. This is a jubilant hymn. Let's sing. And so I do a soprano solo on a loud solo reed with kind of a syncopated harmony thing going on in the left-handed pedal. And then the first hymn, I play it straightforward. The second hymn, I add a few little passing tones. And then the third verse, it talks about the kingdom cannot fail. He rules over earth and heaven. The keys of death and hell to Christ the Lord are given. Since it's talking about death and hell, I thought that might be a good verse to put the melody in the feet on a 32-foot reed. And then as this hymn progresses, I build, and I put the alto up an octave, and I have an inverted pedal point, which means instead of having the held note in the pedal, you have it up in the soprano voice. And so we will listen to that, and then I will come right back to conclude. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, the purpose of me doing this is not to show off, but to illustrate the text. And there's a variety of things that you can do with rearranging voices on a hymn. You can do not only a soprano solo like I did, you can do a tenor solo, you can do the alto up an octave like I did in this hymn. And you can add non-harmonic tones such as passing tone, neighboring tone, suspensions, all of which I won't discuss much here because this is a keynote address, not necessarily a class on how to employ those. But again, thank you so much for having me. I'm very passionate about hymn playing. I have personally been moved countless times by good organists who play hymns in an informed fashion like this. I promise you that as you continue to be the best organist you can be in practice and to incorporate something into your organ playing to better your skills, that you will move more people than you will ever know. Again, thank you so much for having me, and I hope I get to meet with your chapter in person in the very near future. Have a great workshop.